And okay, so we now discuss. Okay, so hello again. So we now discuss the concept of state responsibility, deportation, and extradition in public international law. All right. So what's the definition, or what is the concept of doctrine of state responsibility? So under general international law, the responsibility of a state is engaged if the action of its agents or actions otherwise attributable to it constitute an internationally wrongful act or acts in violation of its international obligation. So, before we discuss further the concept of state responsibility, so there's this traditional view and the modern view. So, the traditional view would entail that state responsibility for there would be state responsibility, or the state would be responsible for injuries to aliens, but this is determinative, or this is going to be dependent on the concept of international standard of justice. Then we have the modern view, because as early as the 2000s, the International Law Commission has already drafted its articles on state responsibility. So in the ILC articles on state responsibility, okay, there's already a definition, a common definition in the said ILC articles as to the definition, or what constitutes an internationally wrongful act. So for this purpose, an internationally wrongful act must, number one, be attributable to the state under international law, and it should constitute a breach of an international obligation of the state. Okay. Now, of course, in the traditional view, and this is prevalent in your older books like in Cruz, Salonga, and Yap, I think, Defensor Santiago. Of course, this, remember that, of course, especially these classic books, okay? These were written before 2000 eh. Yung sinasabi ko. Of course, Cruz has an updated version because of Professor Carlo Cruz. But of course, the discussion on international standard justice is prevalent in this classic book. So, and of course, as adapted with other international law resources. Okay, so what is international standard of justice? So it is defined as a standard of the reasonable state and calls for compliance with the ordinary norms of official conduct observed in civilized jurisdictions. It may refer to the intrinsic validity of the laws passed by the state, or to the manner in which such laws are administered and enforced. So, example here in the example of Justice Cruz. So, a law imposing a death penalty for petty theft would fall short of the international standard. So too would be one calling for the arbitrary punishment of the accused persons without compliance with the requisites of due process. So this would be instances where the international standard of justice rule would prevail. All right. Then of course, in the modern view, we have now the concept of the two basic principles of state responsibility under the ILC articles. So there are two elements. Okay, so the first one would be attribution, and the second one would be internationally wrongful acts. Okay, so what do we mean by attribution? So states can be held responsible for such acts as long as that act would be attributed to them. So the notion of acts is also thought to cover omissions, but this is not always easy to operationalize. Okay, sometimes not respecting a duty to act results in a clear omission leading to responsibility. So, for example, if you fail to protect your diplomatic premises, that might be considered as something that might arise responsibility. But then it is difficult to think of legally relevant omissions in the absence of a clear duty to act. And this plagues in particular the law of international organizations that are attributable to them. Then, of course, the second element will be internationally wrongful acts, or acts that are somehow committed in violation of an international obligation incumbent on the state, incumbent on the state. Okay. Then let's go into detail the concept of attribution or imputation. So of course, when we speak of imputation or attribution, okay, attribution, well, the point is, well, as the state is not responsible for every injury suffered by an alien. Of course, the concept there is, of course, the state is not an insurer of the life or limb or property of the alien. The rule is that if he suffers injuries at the hands of a private person, his recourse would be against that person and not against the state. So the state will be responsible only if it is shown that it participated in the act or omission complained of or was remiss in redressing the resultant wrong. Thus, the state would be liable if, having knowledge of an impending riot against foreigners, it makes no effort to prevent it, and more so if it actually instigates or encourages it, it would be also liable if the offense has been committed against the alien and it does not take adequate steps to apprehend and punish the malefactors. Okay, so this was asked before in the bar. So how am I going to actualize this? So for example, maganda example nito for Pilipinas sana, but it's going to be in a negative light if I'm going to use it. Let's say na lang Brazil na lang. Brazil. Brazil has a worse crime rate than us. As in, even if they have CC, I have seen a lot of documentaries about Brazil. Even if you go out in the night, okay, and there are a lot of CCTVs, even you just step out after around 20-25 seconds, someone will approach you and he's going to hold you up. Okay? Ganun kalala ang totoo si medyo tame pa nga tayo dito sa Pilipinas pero wag naman sana lumala, 'di ba? Because of, syempre kaya na naman nagkakaganyan, may poverty incidents, 'di ba? Remember sa Brazil, ang daming favelas doon yung mga informal settler projects na yung mga ghettos nila doon, di ba? So, pero ganun ang dating na. So, let us say, ikaw, turista ka, paglabas mo, ni-snatch lahat ng mga gamit mo ng Brazilians. Sabihin natin na huli nyo yung snatcher, okay? You cannot blame Brazil per se because of that, because that's part of their, yung crime nila, incidents. The remedy of example, you as a tourist, you got held up or you got snatched in Brazil, is of course to file the proper proceedings as if you are filing something in court there in Brazil. Okay? Hindi mo pwedeng habulin si Brazilian government dahil na hold upan ka, 'di ba? Yung mga ganung bagay. Hindi ka basta-basta makakapag-claim ng you're going to attribute the crime of the snatcher or the hold-upper in Brazil to the state itself. Hindi mo ma-attach siya sa Brazil, okay? But paano kung ang issue is may rally like yung sinabi dito na of course kung merong impending riot against foreigners, it makes no effort to prevent it, okay? May tanong yan sa I think 2000 and not our bar. It's the bar after us or I think the bar previous to us. May tanong doon na may tourist na Amerika na pumunta sa Thailand. Then I remember this question was asked at the time na magulo yung Thailand. May mga red shirt protesters kasi against kay Thaksin at that time, if I can recall it correctly. So may mga red shirt protesters. So syempre, nung nagkakaroon ng protest, kakagulo. So parang yung problem set sa bar was, yung American, they went to a tourist holiday sa Thailand. Nataon na nagkaroon ng napadaan siya sa isang red shirt protest. Tapos na-injure siya or hindi ko malala kung napatay siya or nagkaroon siya ng physical injuries. So the question was about state responsibility kasi ang tinatanong, responsible ba si Thailand dun sa injuries caused by caused against the American. So yun yung tanong dun sa bar exam, okay? Depending of course how you're going to answer it, 'di ba? Kasi pwede mo kasing sabihin na depende how we're going to argue it. It's either pwedeng hindi protektahan ng Thailand kasi may impending protest This was the time na magulo ang Thailand So it refers to a protest. On the other hand, kung unanticipated naman yung riot, 'di ba? Nagkaroon lang ng gulo, 'di ba? Hindi naman necessary na magiging state ma-attribute mo 'yon sa Thai government, 'di ba? Kasi syempre, paano ko aksidente lang, nagkagulo? So, depending on how, if I remember that problem, it depends on how are you going to couch or how are you going to lead or how are you going to apply your legal basis. Kasi, sana sabi ko sa inyo naman, sa bar, ano naman yan eh, it's always both, you can explain it through both sides of the lenses eh, di ba? But I think since this is international, ang daming pwede explanation. So, to be particular in this instance, pwede mong i-argue na hindi siya yung acts ng red shirt protesters they are not necessarily attributable to the Thai government. Diba? Kasi hindi naman mababasa ng Thai government kung ano yung magiging action ng mga yan. Of course, the assumption is they are just peaceful protesters na bigla nag-riot. Diba? Pwede mo rin kasing isagot din na, well, kahit sabihin mo may protesters ka, your riot may be impending regardless. You cannot just assume that it's going to be peaceful all the time, di ba? So pwede din ganun yung maging impression niya, okay? All right. So that's your So yun yung example nung application nung concept of attribution, okay? Then of course there is this concept of no preferential treatment of aliens in the local state. So here, the alien must accept the institutions of the state as he finds them. So as a matter of fact, he may even be denied certain rights available to nationals, such as the right to vote and the right to operate particular businesses. However, the alien may complain if the laws of the state do not conform with the international standard of justice. So in such a case, he may claim better treatment than that accorded to the nationals of the state. Okay. All right. So what does it mean? Of course, we have the concept of attribution. What about the concept of international wrongful act or violation of your international legal obligation? So, under the Articles of State Responsibility, states can only be held responsible for acts that violate their international legal obligations. In other words, international law does not utilize a system of strict or absolute liability. Thus, the wrongful act is an essential requirement. So in the case of, let's say, an allegation of a treaty violation, this presupposes that the state is a party to the treaty in question. If it is not, no legal obligation is incumbent upon it, and hence, it cannot be held responsible even if the behavior in question is quite obnoxious. So this implies that states cannot be held responsible for activities that are harmful or cause damage, okay, but are nonetheless legal. So an example would concern, let's say, for example, an execution order under the death penalty of a foreigner. So the state which accepts the death penalty and is not a party to any treaty outlawing cannot be held responsible for the execution of a convicted criminal, even though the execution causes harm in the most literal way. Okay? This is not to say that no responsibility can occur from acts involved in the trial or sentencing of the individual concerned, since other legal obligations may be involved and may have been violated. Now, are there exceptions to this to this concept of international wrongful act? So there are certain exceptions, and it's quite unusual because this involves a bit of space. It involves outer space, okay? So the exception would be, of course, in the 1972 Convention on International Liability for Damage caused by space objects. So in Article 2 of the said convention, a launching state shall be absolutely liable to pay compensation for damages caused by its space object on the surface of the earth or in aircraft in flight. Okay? Syempre, dahil international yung objectus nung space mo, you don't know if, let's say, mag-crash yan, di ba? Hindi mo alam kung saan tatama eh. Di ba? So kung sino man may nag-launch noon, yung launching state, syempre responsible siya doon kung magkaroon man ng damage doon sa kung saan siya mag-landing na unexpectedly magla-land siya in that particular place, okay? Then one exception would be a complaint under the GATT or yung General Agreement on Tariff and Trade at sa World Trade Organization law against against a state for causing economic damages even without applicable rules being violated, as long as benefits under the trading regime are at stake. Okay. Now, generally, then damage or harm is not treated as a precondition. What matters is the violation of an international obligation, whether this entails material damage or not. Okay. The idea here is that damage is not always manifested in material ways, but can also be conceptualized as a violation of someone's rights or as moral damage, especially in the politically sensitive world of international relations. Situations may arise which are clear violations without causing material damage. An intrusion into airspace, for instance. So it constitutes a violation of international law without necessarily creating material damage. Then we have direct and indirect state responsibility. So direct responsibility attaches to the state if the wrongful act or omission is effected through any of its superior organs acting on its behalf. So thus, a political decision of its chief executive or its national legislature would be an act of state, and as no recourse would be available against it, would give rise to immediate state responsibility if an alien is injured thereby. Well, by contrast, there are wrongs committed by superior government officials or even by private individuals which cannot be immediately regarded as acts of state itself. The responsibility of the state in such cases would only be vicarious or indirect and can be excused by proof that it was not negligent in preventing injury or in vindicating the rights of the alien. So, example here is of course the failure of the state to protect the embassies from a hostage situation. If you can recall yung dun sa Iran, 'di ba, nagkaroon ng hostage crisis before. Then of course, yung US versus Nicaragua as to sending of paramilitary troops to assist rebels, okay? Then what would be the conditions now for the enforcement of state responsibility? Okay, so napansin nyo yung two elements, di ba? Kailangan ma-attribute or ma-impute nyo doon sa state. And kailangan meron ka talagang internationally wrongful act. Okay? Ayun, may conditions yan para ma-enforce mo yung state responsibility. So this is the assumption that, of course, this is the assumption where there is already there should be an enforcement of the state responsibility. So the first step is, of course, the injured alien must first exhaust all local remedies. So the state must be given an opportunity to do justice in its own regular way without unwarranted interference with its sovereignty by other states. Moreover, the alien is presumed and required to take into account the local remedies for determination and redress of wrongs and ascertainment of state responsibility, if any. As have been, of course, observed, it is a sound principle that there is a judicial remedy. It must be sought, and only if it is in vain, thus diplomatic interposition would become proper. Then when would this exhaustion of remedies be dispensed with? Okay, so if there are no remedies to exhaust, whether because of intrinsic defect of the laws of the local state or laxity or arbitrariness in their enforcement, as when the courts are notoriously corrupt, there will be no local remedy against the so-called acts of state, which are not subject to judicial review. In such cases, the injured alien may immediately seek for the assistance of its own state. So what would be actual example? So we have this Rome Statute. There is this concept of primacy of national jurisdiction. So the assistance would be of its own state. Then we can see this also in our Human Rights Council or CEDAW communications. Well, ang laging depensa ni respondent state, okay, you should exhaust your local remedies, okay, unless there are compelling reasons to waive or justify such requirement. Doon sa Rome Statute, di ba, ang in-invoke nila aside doon sa primary of national jurisdiction, syempre, this is also interplayed with the argument on complementary. Diba? So, na complementary lang ang ICC, it can only be activated or can be given already jurisdiction if the remedies of the local law should be first exhausted before they go to the ICC, as in there is no more hope of having justice, diba, or having semblance of resolution within the domestic law or municipal law sphere. Okay? Now, then of course the second condition is so of course the first one would be must exhaust all local remedies. The second one would be he must be represented in the international claim for damages by his own state. So the doctrine of state responsibility is based on an injury to a state through injury to one of its nationals. So that if the injured person is not a national of the complaining state, there no injury legally speaking has been inflicted upon it. Hence, it would not be a proper party to institute a claim on behalf of the injured person. Okay? For the viewpoint of international, and we discussed this initially, diba, sa subject and object of international law, it is the state of the alien and not the alien itself. What has been violated? In legal theory, it is not the right of the alien but the right of the state to have its nationals adequately protected when in the jurisdiction of the other state. Okay. The alien would therefore be regarded merely as an object of international law and can act not directly but through the instrumentality of its own state enforcing an international claim for damages. But of course, this is subject to some recognized exceptions. So this is the general rule. But of course, there would be certain exceptions. Like for example, one example would be, if you can recall, Count Fort Bernadotte was assassinated in Palestine. This was the outbreak of the first Arab-Israeli war. So Count Fort Bernadotte was doing his job as a mediator, but he was assassinated. So later on, after the war has already been done, okay, of course, the United Nations was allowed to recover damages from Israel on the account of the assassination of Count Fort Bernadotte. Okay, then likewise under the European Convention of Human Rights, the European Commission of Human Rights and also contracting states other than the home state of the injured alien may bring alleged infractions or violations of the convention before the European Court of Human Rights. Okay, so that's are the exceptions for international claims of damages from its own state. Okay, then of course in the discussion of course in of international liability, possible international liability. So there is this concept of a Calvo clause. So what is a Calvo clause? So a Calvo clause is it is a stipulation in a contract by virtue of which an alien waives or restricts his right to appeal to his own state in connection with any claim arising from a contract with a foreign state and limits himself to the remedies available under the laws of the state, which shall be considered as nationals of the country in the execution of the contract. So the purpose of your Calvo clause is to discourage foreigners from seeking diplomatic intervention on behalf of their contractual rights. So what is the legality of this Calvo clause? So insofar as it requires the alien to exhaust the remedies available in the local state, it may be enforced as a lawful stipulation. However, it may not be interpreted to deprive the alien's alien state, okay, yung state no alien, of the right to protect or vindicate his interest in case they are injured by the local state. So, as cited in the case of United States versus Mexico, under the rules of international law, of course, the question is, may an alien lawfully make a promise as is embodied in the Calvo clause, okay? So, the commission holds, okay, that the one that decided the case, okay, that he may, but at the same time holds that he cannot deprive the government of his nation of its undoubted right of applying international remedies or to violations of international law committed to his damage. So such government frequently has an higher interest in maintaining the principles of international law than in recovering damage for one of its citizens in a particular case. And manifestly, such citizen cannot, by contract, tie in this respect the hands of its government. Okay. Of course, how we're going to enforce it? So usually of course, if there would be any claim, it's usually by negotiation. So if this fails, other modes may be employed, like good offices, mediation, arbitration, judicial settlement, etc. So retortions and reprisals have been also involved or employed in difficult cases. So in fact, redress of the rights of the accused national has been invoked as justification for intervention by some states. Okay? Then reparation. So in international law, the duty to make reparations means the obligation to reestablish that the state of affairs that would have been probably have existed had the international tort have not been committed. So the particular function of his rule is to assist in the restoration of the legal equilibrium which has been disturbed by the commission of the international tort. So are there forms of reparations? Yes, under Articles 34 to 36, it can be by way of a restitution. It can be by way of compensation as well as through satisfaction. Okay. Now we go to, of course, so we're going to, of course, the first one is if there would be aliens, what is the extent of state responsibility? The next discussion would concentrate on the bar of aliens by the state from its territory. So the question is, can state bar aliens from its territory? The answer there is yes, it is allowed. Such act would be within the competence of the state as territorial sovereign. However, an exclusionist policy would invite retaliation in kind and prevent the nationals of the state from entering the territories of other states. So thus isolating from the rest of the world. Okay? So that's your dali lang ah. So that should be off. This is other, okay? Yeah. Baka hindi nyo ano eh. Yan. So sa mga so that's the correction there, okay? So I'll just clear them all, okay? Di ay mag-clear. Hehehehe. Naka-eraser kasi yan. So alright, so let's go to the next slide, okay? Alright, so how are you going, what are the manifestations of this possible bar of aliens? So the first one would be this concept of deportation, okay? So of course, one of the cases which you can read that explains how deportation really works is the case of Harvey versus Defensor Santiago. So deportation is of course, they cited several cases. We kind of dissected it. So of course, deportation is the inherent power of the state to exclude aliens from its territory upon such grounds that it may be proper for its self-preservation or public interest. Okay. Then the power what is the nature of deportation? So the power or the nature of deportation, the power to deport of aliens is an act of state. This is an act done or under the authority of the sovereign power. So this is a police measure against undesirable aliens, okay, whose continued presence in the country is found to be injurious to the public good and the domestic tranquility of the people. So note, deportation arises from an act of state. Note that it arises from the state's sovereign power. Okay, it's something which is traditional. It arises from that element of sovereignty. Okay, all right. I have to emphasize it because after this we're going to compare this with extradition. All right. Now, of course, we now have also the concept of extradition. So, of course, the extradition is the surrender of a person to one state or another where he's wanted for prosecution or if already convicted for punishment of service of sentence. But note that the difference between deportation and extradition is deportation is something which would exercise powers which are existent or has in principle exist to be made. Like, for example, it's an act of state. Even in public international law, there is this concept of an act of state. It is similar. The application there is similar that it's considered as the consideration of deportation as an act of state is also considered by way of fiction of international law. Okay. But you have to determine now, of course, you have to compare extradition with deportation. So, well, in extradition, there is a formal request of the state of origin, where deportation is the unilateral act of the state in its own sovereign power. So in extradition, the basis from the offenses of the state of origin. So in deportation, the causes arose from the local state. So syempre, ba't ka nagpapa-extradite? Kasi meron kang ginawa dun sa nagpapakuha sa'yo na country, di ba? For example, you are going to be extradited in the US. The reason is because you have a case in the United States. Sa deportation, may ginawa kang mga bagay-bagay. You did something undesirable here that merited your deportation here in the Philippines or in another country. Okay? Or example, in another country, naging kang pasaway doon, you did something, you did something horrendous, 'di ba? Or stupid. I-hold ka talaga ng immigration doon. Baka ma-deport ka bigla, 'di ba? In some other countries, pag napansin nila kaya ka pumunta kasi mukhang mag-job hunting ka, hindi alam nung immigration officer, pag ganun dinideport nila agad, pinapauwi nila sa next flight. Depending on the country, 'di ba? Usually mga first world countries, they have this a bit of a unbridled discretion to determine whether or not they're going to admit certain foreigners or aliens inside their territory. Okay? All right. So of course, basis of our extradition treaty. So, no legal obligation for a state to surrender fugitives of another state. The state of refuge has every right to allow the fugitive to remain in its territory in the absence of an extradition treaty. In the absence of such treaty, the local state shall have the power to grant asylum to the fugitive and refuse to turn over to the state of origin. But note that, remember, these are matters that can be weighed depending on how are you going to pressure a country. If you can recall Tevez, si Congressman Tevez, 'di ba? The one that relented so that Philippines can get back Tevez to be taken home here in the Philippines is not necessarily the Philippines asking for it, because note that there is no extradition treaty between the US and East Timor. But for some reason, I don't know what the Philippines did, what our diplomats did, is, of course, you can actually convince a state to exercise, at babalik ulit tayo dun sa concept ng act of state, okay? It's going to be justified under an act of state that East Timor would decide to, they're just going to surrender Tevez because it might be of their best interest to do it. Okay? So despite having this rule that there should be an extradition treaty, of course, at the end of the day, it depends. Of course, it depends on negotiation. It has a myriad of factors. It can be also diplomatic issues. Okay, you can actually request a state to at least waive the rules or derogate from that rules, and ask for let's say the surrender of the national. Okay, whether or not it's legal or not, of course, remember that's the issue on international law. If it might be functus officio later on, diba? We don't know. We don't know if Tevez will do something if he gets acquitted or convicted. Depende sa case naman niya yun, di ba? But insofar as, of course, his issue naman, it's already functus officio naman eh. Okay? It's already functus officio. But you have to note that extradition, since we're in this realm of nangyayari kasi nabebend yung law, di ba? Yun ang topic ngayon while I'm talking right now and recording this, di ba? They have this penchant of always trying to bend the law, okay? Minsan nag-iiba interpretation, pero stick kayo sa those listening right now, stick on the concepts of the books. That is the correct interpretation. Other political opinions notwithstanding, okay, or other legal opinions that has political color notwithstanding, let us stick with our legal resources. Extradition, you need treaties. Okay? You don't need to wrangle on that issue. You need treaties. Okay? All right. Next, let's go to next. So what are the postulates of extradition? This was explained, I think, if I can recall, this was explained in Lanchon versus Secretary of Justice. If I'm not mistaken, this is the MR resolution of the Lanchon versus Secretary of Justice. So the Supreme Court formulated postulates of extradition. So the first one is extradition is the major instrument for the suppression of crime. Extradition treaties are entered into for the purposes of suppressing crime by facilitating the arrest and the custodial transfer of the fugitive from one state to the other. It is the only regular system that has been devised, okay, to return fugitives to the jurisdiction of the court competent to try them in accordance with municipal and international law. Then the requesting state would accord due process to the accused, okay? So an extradition treaty presupposes that both parties here thereto have examined and have that both accept and trust each other's legal system and judicial processes. More pointedly, our duly authorized representative signature on an extradition treaty signifies our confidence in the capacity and the willingness of the other state to protect basic rights of the person sought to be extradited. That signature signifies our full faith that the accused would be given, upon extradition to the requesting state, all relevant and basic rights in the criminal proceedings that will take place therein. Otherwise, the treaty would have not been signed or would have been directly attacked for its unconstitutionality. Then, the proceedings, ito yung pinaka-importante, the proceedings in an extradition treaty are sui generis. So the process of extradition does not involve the determination of the guilt or innocence of the accused. So an extradition treaty is summary in nature while criminal proceedings involve a full-blown trial. In contradistinction to a criminal proceeding, the rules of evidence in an extradition proceeding allow admission of evidence under less stringent standards. Then in terms of the quantum of evidence to be satisfied, a criminal case requires proof beyond reasonable doubt or conviction, while a fugitive may be ordered extradited upon showing an existence of a prima facie case. Then finally, unlike in a criminal case where judgment becomes executory, upon being rendered trial, in an extradition proceeding, our courts may adjudge an individual extraditable, but the president has the final discretion to extradite him. So extradition is merely a measure of international judicial assistance through which a person charged with or convicted of a crime is restored to a jurisdiction with the best claim to try that person. It is not part of the function of the assisting authorities to enter into questions that are the prerogative of that jurisdiction. The ultimate purpose of extradition proceedings in court is only to determine whether the extradition request complies with the extradition treaty and whether the person sought is extraditable. Then compliance, okay, number 4. Okay, I think there are 6. Number 4, compliance shall be made in good faith. So the executive branch of the government voluntarily entered into the extradition treaty and our legislative branch ratified it. Hence, the treaty carries the presumption that its implementation will serve the national interest. Now, fulfilling the obligations under the extradition treaty promotes comity with the requesting state. On the other hand, the failure to fulfill under paints a bad image of our country before the world community. Such failure would discourage other states from entering into treaties in the Philippines, particularly an extradition treaty that hinges on reciprocity. Okay? So, of course, the 5th one would be there is an underlying risk of flight. So, persons to be extradited are presumed to be flight risk. This prima facie presumption finds reinforcement in the experience of the executive branch. Nothing short of confinement shall ensure that the accused will not flee the jurisdiction of the requested state in order to thwart their extradition to the requesting state. Okay, so then we now have these fundamental postulates of extradition. There are 5 postulates that were formulated. Okay, all right. Now we now go to the fundamental principles of extradition. So, first one. So, of course, extradition is based on the consent of the state as expressed through a treaty. Then we have this principle of specialty. A fugitive may only be extradited for the crime specified in the request for the extradition and the list of the crimes or offenses in the extradition treaty. So ito usually is a defense being done in extradition proceedings. There might be a violation of the principle of specialty. There should there should be a specification or specialty. It should be specific as to the crimes requested either in the extradition or it is listed. Kasi depende kasi sa extradition treaty yan. Pwede kasi na mag-agree yung states na kung ano yung nakalagay na crime. Okay? They're going to be specific with the crime. Meron naman ding ibang mga extradition treaties may list ng lahat ng crimes. So itong crime na to sa RPC applicable. Yung sa US Criminal Code yun na applicable. Meron silang list. Okay? So note that not all kinds of crimes are extraditable. It depends on if it is listed in your extradition treaty. Okay? Pero syempre, pag meron kang extradition treaty, you have to contend with this principle of specialty. So iba dyan, some they usually use technical wizardry or technical ways to thwart the extradition because they're going to say that it violates the principle of specialty. Okay. Then fundamental principle number 3. So any person may be extradited regardless if the fugitive be a national of the requesting state or the state of refuge or of another state. Then, as a general rule, political and religious offenses are not extraditable offenses, okay? But there are exceptions. So, if you have an enteta clause, okay, this refers to a murder of the head of state. So, let's say if a foreigner kills, example, there is a, let's say there is a terrorist group from Saudi, okay? They send someone to kill, let's say, President Trump, okay? Or let's say or any head of state, okay? If the crime was committed, okay? If the United States and Saudi Arabia would have an enteta clause, okay? It would mean that of course when we have that clause, it's an exception. So you can extradite that person, okay? Even if the reason is that of a political crime. It's a political crime eh. Example, you assassinated the president, di ba? It's a political crime, but it's an exception to it being not extraditable, okay? Then if there would be offenses under the Genocide Convention and other similar conventions, these are also exceptions to non-extraditability, okay? Now, of course, number 5, in the absence of a special agreement, the offense must have been committed within the territory or against the interests of the demanding state. Then the last one is the principle of dual or double criminality. So the act subject of extradition must both be punishable within the requesting and requested states. Kaya nga yan yung itong principle of dual criminality. This was explained, of course, in US versus Purganan. Of course, may dual criminality kasi, di ba? If you can recall si Mark Jimenez, he is charged with illegal contributions. Parang in-apply yata doon, may list of offenses. So it happened that, of course, yung illegal contribution, we have a parallel criminal offense under the Omnibus Election Code, di ba? Illegal expenditures, that's a criminal offense eh, di ba? Under your OEC, okay? Kaya naging extraditable yung case ni Mark Jimenez, okay? Because may parallel siya dun sa violation niya na chine-charge sa kanya sa United States, okay? Of course, flow of extradition process. The requesting state shall inform the DFA of such extradition request, usually through a formal communication. So if DFA finds no objection, the same would be referred to the DOJ. Then the DOJ would then file a petition before the RTC of appropriate jurisdiction for the enforcement of the extradition. Then the regional trial court, by a way of a summary hearing, shall hear and decide whether the extradition request be granted or denied. Okay? Of course, this is the jurisdiction. I think we have been discussing, of course, syempre punta muna tayo sa case. So, of course, Puraganan has been modified because of was been modified by Hong Kong Special Administrative Region versus Honorable Olaya. Of course, one of the issues in Purganan is whether Mark Jimenez can post bail in an extradition proceedings. In Purganan, the Supreme Court considering that bail is a sui generis proceeding, the applicability of bail under the rules of criminal procedure it does not apply, or it does not follow there. Okay, so hindi siya pinag-bail. But in the Hong Kong SAR versus Honorable Oralia case, the Supreme Court differed its view. They considered, as we have explained in our previous cases, on referring to this case, 'di ba? That, well, there is already an evolution of a person not just being a mere object of international law, it can also be a subject of international law. And this would be one of the instances that were mentioned, that a person that is subject to an extradition proceeding may be granted would be granted or be allowed to post bail. All right. Okay, so before we